All right, go for it, John.
Let's jump into the Olympics.
Yeah.
Why not give us a few stories, memories, moments as you look back? You were in two Olympics, and what was that like for a kid from Hawaii and then Azusa Pacific?
Yeah, the Olympics were incredible. I mean, they were absolutely incredible. I always say I got to be a part of two of I think the best Olympics in modern history. In my first Olympics was in 2004. That was in Athens, Greece. That's actually where I won this medal, my silver medal. I wish we were in person because I'd show it to you guys in person. If you can see, it's all tarnished and nasty. The virtual background's messing it up, but it's all tarnished and nasty because people are rubbing it, and I let them wear it and take pictures with it. But I won my silver medal in Athens, Greece, and there's just something about being in the birthplace of the Olympic Games. I mean, there was so much history, and I'm not like a huge history buff, but there's certain, things you just can't ignore. And so when you're sightseeing around, Athens, and you're seeing the original Olympic Stadium, and you're traveling the original marathon path, and you're seeing the Acropolis, and you're seeing, all of these just amazing sites that date back to like the Bible days, right? Like some of these things. I mean, it's unbelievable. And so that was just an amazing Olympics to be a part of. The opening ceremonies had just so much history, and they brought it all into this giant show at the Olympic Games there in the Olympic Stadium, and it was just so cool. And so I loved that. I went in as an underdog for that Olympics, and so that was a totally different experience in my Beijing Olympics, which was the next Olympics in 2008, where I won my gold medal, which, this is what the gold medal looks like. And on the back of this one is a little different because each country gets to decorate the back of the Olympic medals the way that they want to. And so that's kind of the front. And so Beijing was a spectacle because, of course, I'm not trying to offend anybody, but it's not the same as the US in terms of the freedoms that the people there have, right? And so they were able to completely just move everyone out of the city and tear everything down and rebuild everything. And so everything was brand new and gorgeous and nice, modern toilets. I'd been to Beijing, I would say 6 years or 7 years before the Olympics for a competition, and it was still holes in the ground to go to the bathroom. I mean, public bathrooms, you were squatting on a hole next to somebody, and that's just how you went, but this was a completely different Beijing. And so when they moved all those people out, they created just this safe space that was just gorgeous. And then they built this gigantic stadium that was just so intricate in the way that it was designed. It was called the Bird's Nest, and it would light up at night and change colors. And I was staying about 100 yards away from the Bird's Nest in an apartment that had a view of the Bird's Nest every night. It was just so cool. And then you get into the stadium, and the stadium seats 100,000 people. And so you walk in there, and there's just 100,000 people, and the stadium is completely full. And guys, I don't know if you've ever, it doesn't do it justice when you see it on TV, but I will tell you, there is nothing better than having the US flag on your chest, walking in under the stadium and entering into a stadium with 100,000 people there, knowing that the world is a little bit of a crazy place, and people have their own views and all that kind of stuff, but walking in and just knowing and feeling the electricity and knowing that you represent the best country on planet Earth. Like, there is nothing cooler than that. I mean, it's just the coolest feeling. And so you walk in there and the stadium just goes crazy. It just goes crazy. And everywhere you look, there's flashes of light going everywhere. And there's people waving US flags. And I mean, there are people from other countries waving US flags. And it is just so cool. And it's one of the highlights of the games. But doing it in Beijing with the spectacle that they put on, with 100,000 people watching, in live in the stadium, and the floor opening up and all the stuff. I mean, it was just nobody, I don't know if anybody could ever top the show that they put on, in live like that. I mean, it was just unbelievable. Now, I will say, I think they said they had something, I can't remember how many thousands of volunteers, but they called them volunteers, and they weren't necessarily volunteers, and the money, you know, that they get. So there's all kinds of stuff behind that, but they put on a phenomenal show.
Wow. And then tell us a couple other just moments, highlights, the competitive part, I don't know.
Yeah. So in, you know, I talk about my Olympic moments. I mean, in 2004, I was competing. I was 24 years old. I was the youngest person on the team in terms of the decathletes. And I was getting ready to compete. I went through the first event. I was into the second event, the third event, the long jump, and we're sitting there. And as we're sitting there, hang on, 100 long jump shot put. Sorry, second event. It's been a while since I've done it. Second event, and it's the long jump, and I just got done running the 100 meters, and I ran amazing. And I get to the long jump, and I've got my Oakley sunglasses on because they were a sponsor, and I'm standing in the middle of the stadium. It's hot, you know, the sun's beating down on you. The stadium's like half full. It's not totally full. It's like half full because it's the morning session. They break the Olympics up into morning sessions and evening sessions with a break in the afternoon. As a decathlete, you compete through all of it. So there's a period of time where you're competing and there's like nobody there. It's just your coaches, right? And usually the evening sessions are when everybody comes, because that's when all the finals, you know, happen. So you have the Usain Bolts and the, you know, whoever else that are running during that period. So everybody comes to watch that. Nobody cares about the decathletes. But I was competing, and I remember standing there thinking to myself, man, this is pretty amazing. And I was just looking around the stadium, and as I'm looking around the stadium, it's going nuts. So they had this huge group of people up in the stands, and they were beating drums. You know, they had their shirts off and, you know, bandanas on, and they're just beating drums, and they're going crazy, and they're yelling Hellas, which is like how they say Greece in Greek, and so they're chanting Hellas, Hellas, and they're beating these drums, and they've got this music going, and the whole stadium that, you know, 50% full sounded like the Super Bowl, right? I mean, it was just insane. And what they were watching was the Greek race walker, and he was being played up on the big screen in the stadium, because they start around the track, and then they leave and they go out throughout the city, and then they come back and they finish one lap around the track to finish at the finish line. And so he was leading the race walk, and he was getting closer and closer to the stadium. And every time you thought the stadium was as loud as it was going to get, he would get a little closer, and it would just erupt even more, and it would get even louder and even louder. And I remember standing there, I'm supposed to be competing, and I just started to cry. I literally started to cry. And I remember thinking to myself, you know, I can't let my competitors see me. So I'm like wiping my eyes, and I'm like, you know, trying to be tough. I'm trying to jog back and forth, but I couldn't ignore what was going on, and just the matter of fact that I was accomplishing one of my wildest dreams. I was standing right in the middle of the Olympic stadium, my first Olympics, and this was everything that I ever wanted. Gold medal, silver medal, didn't matter. The moment that I was in, that experience that I was experiencing right at that moment, was everything I had dreamed of. It was all the energy. It was all just everything. And I remember thinking to myself, and I said a little prayer, and I just said, God, thank you so much. No matter what happens, thank you so much for this moment right now. This means everything to me. And as soon as I said that prayer, I dried my eyes. I went out, I jumped a personal best in the long jump. I went on to win the silver medal, and put up a pretty big score in terms of US kind of decathletes, the history of US decathletes, and made it to my second Olympics a few years later. So that was my Olympic moment there. And then my Olympic moment in Beijing was a little different. So Beijing, I was going in, or Athens, I went in as the underdog. Beijing, I was going in as a favorite. And leading up to this Olympics, I mean, you've got about a year's worth of media, people that are just in your house. I mean, they're knocking on your door every second. They want photos of you. They want videos of you. That you're going to photo shoots. You're on the Today Show. You're on Letterman. I mean, you're doing all these things, right? And it's just like every day, nonstop for a year, because they're doing the countdown, right, to the year. This year was a little different, but most years there's this countdown, and all the stories are told, and they gather all that information early. And so going into this, I was the favorite. People were expecting me to win. And I can remember time where I was sitting with my pastor, and I said, man, I wish that God would just come and sit down in front of me and say, Bryan, don't worry. I've got this all planned out. You're going to win the gold. And, you can just relax. And the fact of the matter is I realized that I probably still would have doubted even if that had happened. But the pressure was so intense. It was almost paralyzing. There were days where you would wake up and you would think to yourself, like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. What happens if, and I remember telling my wife, listen, if I don't win this gold medal, like, we may not be able, like, I won't have a sponsor anymore. I might lose all my sponsors. I can't pay bills. You might have to go get a job. We were really blessed that my wife didn't have to work at the time, and she could just take care of our family. I might have to go get a real job. Like, I can't just play on the track anymore. Like, I might actually have to go and work. But the thing is life was going to look very different for us overnight. It wasn't going to be like, oh, well, you've signed this contract and so you're good for the next 10 years. It was like, within a month, life was going to be very, very different. And that pressure and weight every single day, along with, my mom and my family thinking that I'm going to win. And then the state of Hawaii, which is where I grew up, thinking I was going to win. And then, the state of California, the pressure that was coming on there, and then just nationally the pressure, and then globally the pressure. I mean, it was insane. And so I went into that Olympics with all of that pressure. And it was just a job to try to not succumb to that, to not allow that to affect me, and ended up doing very well there. I ended up competing and taking the lead from the first event and never losing the lead the entire competition. But I remember as I crossed the finish line of the decathlon, the 1,500 meters, and there's 100,000 people in the stadium because it's the evening session, and we get done running that around 11 p.m. I laid on the track completely exhausted, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. My wife was in the stands just waiting. I have a video that you see her, kind of her face, and she's just like, oh my gosh, like, it's over, And I remember thinking to myself, I had this slideshow of my life going through my head. And it was like the old school slideshows, not like your iPhone slideshows. It was like the ones where they fast forward on the film and then stop, that type of slideshow. And it would stop on good moments in my life, and I remember thinking, oh yeah, that was worth it. And then it would stop on like a bad moment sometimes, and I would think, oh yeah, that was worth it. And it would go through. I went through basically my whole life up until that point, and I remember the satisfaction of knowing that I just accomplished my wildest dream. Never in a million years would anybody, if you knew me back when I was a kid, you would never have imagined that I would have done and accomplished what I had just accomplished. And I just realized that I accomplished my wildest dreams, and I didn't compromise who I was and what I believed and my values. That's not to say I wasn't perfect. I mean, I definitely made mistakes, but I felt like I was a better person because of the journey, as I laid there and I watched all of this, than I was when I started. And that satisfaction, is priceless. I don't know if you guys have seen the movie. Some of you probably have. It's Chariots of Fire. It's such a great movie. My mom forced me to watch it when I was in high school, and I was so angry when she made me watch it, but couldn't believe that she was gonna make me watch this movie. But I watched it. And I think as I get older and older and older, I mean, I loved it when I watched it then, but as I get older, I begin to appreciate the story even more. But in the movie, Eric Liddell has a famous quote, and it says, "When I run, I feel God's pleasure." And I can't tell you, when you lay on the track and you've just accomplished this and you feel like you did it the right way, the feeling of your Father in heaven, looking down and saying, good job. Like, you did a great job. Like, there's nothing it's just this feeling of satisfaction that I just can't explain. And I felt like God was looking at me going, hey, listen, you did good. And I felt so amazing just for a moment. And that was my Olympic moment. And it was absolutely amazing. It wasn't when I crossed the finish line. It wasn't any of that stuff. It was laying on the track, completely exhausted, realizing that, you know, I did it, and I did it with God, and I'm better now than I was before, because I was able to do it without compromising. And that's been the goal ever since.
That's great. Just follow up. What would it look like to compromise for an athlete at that level? Is it being lazy, or is it like,
No,
getting
easy stuff.
stuck? What is it?
Yeah, that's the easy stuff, right? Like the not being lazy and all that. I mean, that's hard, but you know, you're in a rhythm and you're in a routine, and so you've got people that are holding you accountable. So you know, you just kind of get into that routine and you just go. But the hard stuff is, you know, when you look at the world that I was in, everything was permissible. I could do whatever I wanted.
Gotcha.
And quite frankly, nobody would have known. I could, you know, I would show up to places. I can remember vividly, you know, riding in a car in Moscow, in a private, you know, car, because they send a car to come pick you up, and the guy in the car asking, you know, what we want to do. I was with a couple other athletes, and you know, me going, oh my gosh, like, you know, listening to what these guys are saying. And he's like, the drivers, as he's driving, you know, flicking through photos of girls on, you know, that are stark naked, you know, flipping through photos saying, which ones do you want? I'll have them come to your room. Like, they'll be there in 20 minutes. Wow. You know, I mean, just crazy things. Like, literally you could get away with anything. You could do whatever you wanted, and nobody would question it. And then to know that nobody would even know. I mean, that's what's hard, you know, like that's really hard. I thought that the hard stuff was gonna be like not taking steroids when I compete, you know, and stuff like that. I'm like, no, that stuff's easy, because I know, you know, I've got a system around me. But when you're traveling alone, when you're in the darkest places, you know, trying to stay focused, and people are just placing this in front of you saying, no, you can do this. I mean, it's a real Adam and Eve kind of moment, you know, and it's tough. It is tough. And you live in that. It's not like you're in it for just an hour. I mean, you're literally in it. I was traveling over 200,000 miles a year. You know, I was in it all the time. And so, so those are the types of compromises. And then the ones that get really tough, you know, beyond that, are the ones that have the, you know, that could potentially have longer lasting consequences that you're not mature enough to think about right then and there. And so some of the things are like turning down, you know, $50,000 to spend 40 minutes at a party that, you know, Jose Cuervo is putting on, and you know there's going to be girls there dancing on poles, and you know, they just want you there to take a couple pictures and then you can bail. They're going to write you a check for 50 grand, you know. And it's like, I'm sitting there with my wife going, you know, $50,000 for like a half hour. Like, are you serious? Like, I should do this, right? You know, it's like, you're trying to justify it in your head, because you're like, I can't pass up on this. The opportunity is too good. And then realizing, like, you know, well, what's going to happen when your kids see a picture of you at a party like that, you know, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and you're talking to your daughters about what you don't think is wise in terms of decisions and things that they're doing and activities that they're taking part of. And they're like, well, but Dad, you know, like, I saw this picture because I was Googling you, because they do, by the way, Google you. I was Googling you online, and I saw this picture of you at this party with this in the background. And I'm like, you know, like that sort of thing. And when you're young, it's, you know, you don't always think about what your kids are going to see online and that sort of thing. And so that stuff gets really tough to navigate too.
So that raises, I mean, I think the question is, so how were you? What would you speak into our community like? So was it you white knuckled it? It was willpower. You had friends around you that supported you or held you close so you wouldn't stray or what? Like,
Yeah.
how did you, like you said, one of the great accomplishments, I'm laying there and I'm realizing I did it, but I did it the right way.
Yeah.
I'm not, not ashamed of the way I did it, or I don't have, but what's the secret sauce? How did your
Yeah.
faith impact that? Give us the real stuff.
So for me, when I went through a real kind of, come to Jesus moment when I had to figure out like who I was, what I was going to do. And one of the things that I realized, as I, was starting to walk with Christ, is how broken I am. And I will admit that to anybody. I am so broken. I screw up every second of every day. And I don't pretend that I'm not, right. Like I know deep down inside that I am. And so I had to first of all truly understand that I'm broken. And I had to truly understand that if I'm left to my own, kind of will, I'm gonna screw up for sure. Like there's just no question about it. And so acknowledging that and understanding that I'm broken, and not being too proud to ask for help, or to be ashamed to say that I am broken. I had to set my life up in a way that was proactive to those things. And so, I got to a habit where I knew that I did not want to be in a situation where I was sitting in a car with a bunch of guys that didn't believe the same things as me. And when the driver's asking where they want to go and they're trying to get them to take them to a strip club and I'm stuck, right? Like, and I don't want to be the one guy to go, oh, no, I don't want to go, take me to the hotel. I just had to realize, like, I don't want to be in those situations. And so I had to create a plan to not allow myself to even get there. And so I wouldn't travel alone. I took someone with me all the time. I was so committed to that, guys. Like I literally took my pastor to Jamaica with me because nobody else could go. And it was like, I was trying to find somebody to go. My coaches couldn't go. I had a buddy that was a good friend of mine that, he couldn't go. And I was trying to find all these people. My wife couldn't go because we had our little kids and all that stuff. And so I asked my pastor, I'm like, hey, listen, free trip to Jamaica. Like, do you want to go? And he's like, heck yeah. And so, so I bought him a ticket and he flew out there with me. And I'm sitting in the lobby of the hotel with all the athletes, talking to athletes going, hey, yeah, how's it going? Oh, by the way, this is my pastor, Bill. I brought him with me. And they're like, what? They're just looking at me like it's the strangest thing. But I had to commit to maintaining these rules and these boundaries in my life to try to help me not ever even get into those situations. And situations still happen after that because you can't prepare for every single possibility. But if I could knock it down so that I wasn't being hit with these arrows every second of every day, and I could take away 80% of those, then I did have the willpower to withstand 20% of them. Like I could get by. Now, I still did everything I could. Some of the other things I would do is, my wife is the most important thing in the world to me. My family is the most important thing in the world. I want them to know that they hold, behind my faith, and my walk with the Lord and my relationship with the Lord, they hold the highest position in my life. And I never wanted my wife to question where I was or what I was doing, because there was often times when I was out on my own. And so I would do things like, take the last flight out, and I would fly out on the red eye so that I would land at 5 a.m. on the East Coast at, in New York City. And I wouldn't even stop at a hotel. I would literally like change my shirt, throw on my dress clothes, have somebody pick me up, and I would go straight to my event. And I would have events all day long. And I would be on the first flight back home. So 8 p.m., I'd be on a flight back home, flying back to the West Coast. And I would get home, at midnight or later sometimes if my flights got delayed or whatever. But I purposefully did that. And it wasn't easy. There were times when it cost me more money, when it wasn't fun and it just kind of sucked, and it would be so much easier to just stay an extra night. But I set these boundaries up with my wife because I wanted her to know that I was doing everything I could to make sure that my brokenness didn't have the opportunity to do something that I didn't want to have happen.
Yeah, that's a great word. That's a great word for all of us, to that being intentional, proactive, protecting yourself, not reacting when you're in a situation and get ambushed by the evil one. But
Right.
that's really inspiring. I'm just listening.
I think, for a lot of people, you tend to think you are better than you are, and it's like,
Yeah.
I'm just being honest. Like it's so easy to be like, oh, I can do that. Oh, I can handle it. And it's like, no, actually, guys, like, I'm terrible. I am broken. I cannot do it on my own. And I think when the Lord really teaches you that, he really shows you that you're broken and how broken you are, you can't ever go back. You know what I mean? You just know, like, oh my gosh, like, I'm terrible, and that was what it was for me. I just knew that I didn't want to go back. I had a glimpse of what life would look like if I ever went that direction again. And I wanted nothing to do with it. And so it was like, I was just anything and everything that I could do to just try to stay on the straight and narrow, just try to keep me in line. I was taking it. I was trying to do it because I was so afraid of who I am. I even now I'm still so afraid of who I know my flesh is. And I don't want that to be in control.
Yeah. Hey, what a great way to transition into the question of, how did you become the best athlete in the world? I mean, I guess you didn't wake up one day and go, oh, I got accepted to the Olympics and I made the Olympic team. That there was a path, there was a plan. I don't know. Like, how did you go from, I'm a college kid at Azusa competing, to I am now the best athlete in the world, the decathlon champion?
Yeah, listen, it's not easy, right? I mean, I think there's that saying, if it was easy, everybody would do it, right? But I learned a few things along the way as I was competing, and I had some great coaches and some really great men in my life that really spoke to me. My wife was big part of my journey. My mom was a big part of my journey. Those types of things. But what I learned is there like three main things, and I usually I'll sometimes do these workshops on this stuff, and I have exercises that I have people go through. But the first thing I had to learn was how to focus and have a goal, right? Like how to see something and be like, that's what I want, and focus on what it takes to get there. And so when I talk about focus, what I tell people is it's the idea of eliminating all distractions. You have to find a way to take anything that's going on in your life and say, nope, I'm going to push all that aside and just stay, laser focused on that goal. And for some people, they have trouble with this. And some of the areas that they have trouble with is, number one, dreaming. I think sometimes, we live in a world where, dreams like what I got to experience just don't come true for the average person. They didn't come true for people like me. I didn't know how to dream when I was a kid growing up. I'll tell you the truth. I was in high school. I thought, what I was going to do is I thought I was going to work at 7-Eleven. And if I was really lucky, growing up in Hawaii, a friend or somebody would have like a roofing company. Their dad owned a roofing company. I could go, roof for the dad or something. And I would go do dawn patrol and surf in the mornings, work right afterwards. And then, when I was done working, go surf, in the evenings. Wow. Yeah. And that's kind of what I thought, my contribution to the world was. I was incapable of really believing and dreaming even bigger than that. But I remember reading the Prayer of Jabez one year, and that was that book that came out a long time ago. Oh, yeah. And it was about this idea of asking for God to kind of give you his whole blessing, and realizing that blessing is so much bigger than you could ever imagine, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like taking what you think, he can do in your life, and being open to the idea that he could give you so much more. And so trying to like round out, like, what is it that I wanted, figure that out, and then figure out how to focus on that. So that's the first part that I always talk to people about. Really dream big. The second piece is you have to have a plan. Mm-hmm. And when I talk about a plan, there's a couple things that you have to do. So the first thing you have to do is, when you're focusing, is you have to take your life and you have to break it into a few different areas. I think there's a spiritual, an emotional, a physical, a social, and a mental kind of bucket. You put all these things into this bucket. Everything in your life goes into one of those buckets. And I would say that's the easy part, right? The hard part is when you're going through those buckets and you're looking at all the things that are in there. And so I usually have people write this out on 5 different sheets of paper, and they start writing out all the different things that are in their life in their respective buckets. And I say, okay, now go through that list and figure out which one of those things is helping put you one step closer to your goal and which ones are not. And anything that's not putting you one step closer to your goal, you're going to cross that out, right? And what ends up happening is, in those buckets, you find out that you've got a lot of stuff in each bucket, but you walk away with like 2 or 3 things that, should stay in that bucket and that don't get crossed out. And when you're having to cross out things like, certain friends, when you're having to cross out things like, believe it or not, like I had to not cross them out of my life, but I had to recognize them as a distraction, family members. When you're having to, as a young person, cross out a boyfriend or a girlfriend because they're just taking you down the wrong path, right? Like, those things get really, really hard to start crossing out. And you start to realize, like, I don't want to cross that one out. Like, I want this, but I want this too. And it's just not how it works, right?
That's real.
Yeah. So that's the first part, right? Like, you have to do this. Then you have to kind of look at this plan. And the way that I explain the plan to people is, I wasn't trying to be just the best in my high school, or the best in my town or my state, or even in the United States. I was trying to be the best in the world. I was sharing with you earlier, I Googled it, and it was like, they said that my odds of winning the Olympic gold medal in 2008 were 22 million to 1, right? Like, those are terrible, terrible odds. Yeah. But what I had to do was I had to plan, because I wasn't like I just woke up in the morning and said, I think I'll go for a jog today. Like, I don't know, I feel like 5 miles sounds good, so I'll just do that. And then tomorrow, I don't feel like working out. No, that's not how it worked. I had a 4-year plan. So I didn't just know what I needed to do today or tomorrow or a week or a month from now. I knew 4 years out, I could tell you to a T what my day was going to look like. I knew how many calories I was supposed to eat, how fast I needed to run a certain distance down to the thousandth of a second, how much weight I needed to lift down to the half pound. I could tell you where I was going to be in the world. I could tell you what kind of part of my training I was going to be in, how I was going to feel from that. I could tell you pretty accurately how much I was going to weigh, how many hours of sleep I needed. I mean, I could tell you every aspect of my day 4 years in advance. And it's that type of detailed planning that you have to have if you want to be the best in the world, right? And so it's focusing, dreaming, learning how to focus on that dream. It's having this plan. And then the last, and I think maybe one of the most important things, is just surrounding yourself with good people. And so, sometimes those good people aren't necessarily the people that make you feel good, right? They're not always the people that are giving you the yes answer, but they're the people that are challenging you to be better. They're the people that believe in you more than you believe in yourself at times. I can't tell you how many mornings I woke up, and like I said, the pressure was so heavy. I can vividly remember a conversation with my wife. I was in Helsinki, Finland. She had just had my first son. He was weeks old. And I'm talking to her on the phone, and I'm like, telling her, like, I don't want to be here. It's the World Championships, by the way. And I'm saying to her, I don't want to be here. I just want to come home. And she's crying on the phone because, she knows, like, I did not want to be there. And the only reason I stayed is because my coach was flying on a separate flight to actually land and meet me there. So I couldn't leave. And if he hadn't been coming, I probably would have gotten on a plane and just flew home. But I remember my wife talking me through that, right? And just being my rock when I was so weak and vulnerable. And she believed that I needed to stay, and she believed, not because it was her goal, but she knew who I was, what I was trying to accomplish, what it meant to me, and she wasn't going to let me no matter how much she wanted me to be there with her, she wasn't going to let me throw that away because, you know, in my moment of weakness. And I ended up staying, of course, and competing and winning my first world championships that year. You know, and it was absolutely horrible conditions. It was hailing and raining and 50 degrees and cold. And it was just brutal, right? But yeah, it's like having people like that in your life, my coaches that would do the same thing. My mentor, who Terry Franson at Azusa Pacific University, who was the dean of students at the time. My junior high pastor, Richard Ainsworth, who would pick me up when I was, you know, running away from home and fighting with my parents, right? Like those types of people that believe in you, that are willing to sacrifice for you because they believe in you. Those are the kinds of people you want to surround yourself with, because they're the only ones that matter, you know? And so anyways, so that's, I think those three things are how I made it. Of course, we can dive into a whole bunch of other stuff around that, but that's the highlights anyway.
Yeah. Let me skip down to tell us about hard, tell us about brutal. How you pushed your way through hard? Because I can just speak for myself. When I come up against hard, I want to escape. I want to run from it. I don't want to run towards it. I want to run from it. But in your life, hard is part of what you had to embrace. But take us through that. Help us think through, how do we embrace hard?
Yeah. Well, you know, so I tell this to everybody, my coaches, you know, life sounds like, as an athlete, when you look at professional athletes and you see the highlight reels and, you know, and all that kind of stuff, and you're hearing the stories of the private planes and the this and the that, it's like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Like, you have such an amazing life. It's, you know, it's great. But the parts that you don't realize are the days where you wake up and you realize, like, your coaches are literally designing each and every day of your training, which is 6 days a week. I trained for 7 or 8 hours a day, 6 days a week for almost 20 years, right? Wow. So every day I woke up knowing that my coaches were designing my day to try to break me. Like, that's what they did. That was their job.
Say that again. I don't want people to miss
it. They were trying to break me. I mean, that's what they were trying to do. And you know, again, you think the life of an athlete is great. And don't get me wrong, I am not downplaying it. Like, all of those experiences were amazing. But what people don't realize is the heartache and the sacrifice and the brutality of what you have to put yourself through in order to have that moment. And the issue that most people have is they're not willing to do that hard stuff to have that moment. They quit too soon, right? And so they never see or get an opportunity to see that moment that they have in their mind of what they want to accomplish. And so, you know, you have to, as an athlete, you have to really work on yourself kind of mentally, right? To get into this area where you know that this workout is designed to make you fall out on the track, be throwing up, be cramping, to wake up sore every single day, to just be so exhausted that you're passing out and falling over. I mean, it's crazy. And it tests you, you know, they test you in every way possible. Then if it's not hard enough, they'll do things like, because they want you to be prepared, they'll take a sprinkler and bring a sprinkler out when you're trying to throw the shot put in this little ring, so that, you know, oh, well, what if it's raining? Like, we're just going to, you know, throw a sprinkler here so you get to know what it feels like to be in a wet ring with water hitting you in the face. And it's just like, oh my gosh, are you serious right now? Like, I need to just try and get through this. And you're trying to find ways to make it harder. I mean, that's what every single day looked like. But my coaches knew something. And what they knew is, like, if we practiced for easy, then we would only achieve kind of these easy things. We would only be able to handle easy. And there's nothing easy about going and trying to be the best in the world, right? Like, there's nothing easy about trying to accomplish your dreams. It is going to be hard. Life is going to throw things at you. And the reason why is because there's so much that's out of your control. And so you have to train and prepare for anything and everything. And that's just not a fun place. I mean, people ask me all the time, they go, hey, do you want your kids to be Olympians? And I'm like, not really. Yeah. And they're like, what? Why wouldn't you want your kids to be an Olympian? And I usually will tell them, because it's I don't want my kids to have to experience what it's like to take yourself to hell and back. Like, I mean, it really is hell. Like, it's not fun when you're going through all of that. The one little moment that you see in the highlight reel is amazing, but everything, the years that it took to get there, isn't necessarily fun. And I don't want my kids to have to go through that. That's hard, you know?
Wow.
And so, yeah, so that's kind of my story with hard. It's brutal. I think, you know, I remember a pastor saying this once. You know, he said, it's human nature that you know, will never change until the process of change looks better than where we're currently at. And that's like the human side of things. And what we had to learn was, and what I had to understand was, I wanted to change. I wanted to be better, right, than where I was currently at. But I knew that the process to get there was going to be hard. And for so many people, what they do is they look at the process and they go, I don't know. And so I start out by asking all of my athletes when I would coach them, and even the people that I do some corporate coaching and things like that. You know, one of the things I always ask them is like, listen, do you really want it? Is the goal that you're looking for, do you really want it? Because we're going to find out, right? Like, we're going to find out real quick whether or not you really want that goal. And if you just don't think you want it, then just save yourself the trouble, because you can go do something else with your time. I mean, honestly, and there's no judgment there. It's just like, you have to be honest with yourself. Is this what you really want? And what are you willing to sacrifice to do it? And you know, there's other questions I asked too, is like, I remember a friend of mine, she's, you know, amazing Olympian, hasn't won an Olympic medal and you know, yet. And she's had to live with that. And it's been a heavy weight for her to carry. And I tell her the opposite. I'm like, listen, you got to want it so bad. You have to want it almost more than anything in the world, right? But you can't want it too bad, right? Like, and that doesn't make sense to people, but there's a balance. And so, you know, finding that balance and you know, having people around you and you know, figuring out, is this what I really want? And am I willing to sacrifice these things in my life for it? That's going to help put you on a path to you know, realizing the things that you want to accomplish.
Yeah. Was it worth it?
Yeah. Was it worth it? I mean, that's the question.
The sacrifice, the hard, the brutal.
Yep.
Would you say it was worth it? Or
I would say it was worth it. I think, you know, one of the things that I would tell everybody to ask themselves, you know, as you're working towards your goal is that question, you know, when I finally get what I want, will it be worth the price that I paid?
Say that again.
Yeah. When I finally get what I want, will it be worth the price that I paid? And that's a question that I'm constantly asking myself, and it helps direct me, you know, as I'm looking to make decisions. It's like, I know that's what I want right now, but is it worth my family? Is it worth my relationship with my wife? Is it, or worth my marriage? Is it worth my relationship with my kids? You know, is it worth me, you know, working myself to a bone and just not, you know, having anything less? Is this decision worth my soul and my integrity, and all the things that I've worked so hard to build? I mean, those are kind of the questions that I'm constantly having to try to ask myself as I'm looking at every decision that I make every single day. And you know, sometimes that gets hard. It's blurry. It's, you know, when you stare at something for too long, you know, you start to see cross-eyed. I mean, all of that starts to happen. And that's where the people around me play such an important role.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you, there's a question that came in.
Yeah.
And I have it on my list anyway, about navigating, you know, family and your faith. And the question just is, can you talk about the people and relationships that have contributed to you and your wife being successful in marriage and with your kids?
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, so my wife and I, when we talk, we've talked to like marriage, you know, groups and things, and we'll often say, I came from like an episode of Cops. That was like my upbringing in my family life. She came from an episode of like Leave It to Beaver. Like, that's, you know, I don't think she's ever been spanked, right? Like, the worst thing that she's done is, you know, I think she stuck her tongue out at the neighbor when they were driving by one day. You know, it's like, That's the contrast between us. And so beyond just the grace of God being in our lives, I have had just men in my life that have stepped in and really kind of given me what I was missing in terms of a father role. In fact, I can remember reading the book The Way of the Wild Heart by John Eldredge, and I was reading that with a group of friends, guys, and I remember one of the things he says in the book is, one of the worst things you can do as a father is tell your son, your pre-adolescent son, you're the man of the house now, and then leave. Because he talks about these stages that you have to go through for maturity to become a man. And when you do that, you take your son, who might be in like the cowboy stage, right, which is like the very beginning, and you immediately fast forward them into the sage stage where they're looking out over their dominion, and they get to like just reap the rewards of their efforts throughout the years. And when they skip those steps, they miss out on all this maturity. So they don't know how to love, because the warrior stage, which comes after the cowboy stage, actually teaches you how to fight for the things that you love, right? And things like that. And so I remember reading that and being so angry, because what I realized is I can remember my dad saying to me before he left, "You're the man of the house now at 10 years old. You need to take care of your mom and your brother." And then he left, right? Like, and I just was so angry because I felt like I was robbed, right? And there was this time in my life where I didn't have the Christian male role model in my life. But what I found as I continued to read and as I went through things is God always placed men in my life that basically listened to the calling that God had on their life, and spoke to my heart, spoke to me, spoke to my soul, and filled that role. And then as I got older, one of the people that really has shown me what it looks like to be a father and a husband and just a good man is my father-in-law. So getting married to my wife is, God has provided me with someone that I look up to, that I call about everything, just to find out, hey, am I on track here with this thought? But I continue, and I've always desired to have these men in my life that are older, that can help guide me. This idea of wisdom, just knowing, I define it as knowing just what to do and just what to say in every situation that draws people closer to the Lord. Right? Like that's what I want. And I've been blessed enough to have those men in my life. Sometimes when I didn't know it, when I wasn't walking with the Lord, I didn't even know it. And other times when I was seeking it out, and God specifically put them there in my path, and I had to take action to create that relationship.
So good. All right, last question. Then we're gonna let you go. You've been awesome. But this is a question I think is kind of burning in people's hearts, which is, how did you prevent burnout? As we listen to your story, and man, 6 days a week, 7-8 hours a day, and hard, and it makes, how does Bryan balance that work and rest? And is burnout a myth, or is it real? And did you hit the wall? Did you ever burn out? Like, what? Take us through. Just speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, burnout is real. It is very real. I think, one of the things that people can do to prevent that is, when I was talking about focus and eliminating distractions, that's one thing that's going to allow you to maybe not get burnout. I tend to get burnt out when I've got a million different things going on. If I'm just doing one thing, I usually have the energy to do that. When I've got 10 or 15 or 20 different things going on, that's when it starts to get hard, because I feel like things are draining me as opposed to filling me up, right? And so along the lines of that focusing is, you have to know when to say no, and sometimes you just have to say no. Not every opportunity is an obligation to take advantage of it.
That's
And
good.
so, so you've got to kind of do that. But I would say, the other thing that I had to do is I had to have a goal that was bigger than just money or fame or some of the materialistic things. I really had to seek out and understand what God was trying to do, what the purpose of where I was and what I was doing was in the larger scheme of things. And for me, I believe that, I used to ask myself, is there someone out there that deserves the blessings that I have more than I do? And the question, that answer is always yes in my mind, right? There's Mother Teresa, there's other people in this world that deserve the blessings that God has given me more than I think I do. And I never, for a long time, I couldn't understand, well, then God, why me? Like, why do you give me these blessings? Like, I don't deserve them. I'm broken. I screw up every single day. Like, why me? And what I realized is God, I think, gave me these blessings because these are my stones of remembrance. And in the Bible, it talks about, how they would stack stones down by the river. And the purpose of that was so that when their children would come and say, hey, what's this stone for? Right? It would create this monument. They'd say, well, what is this stone right here for? It was their opportunity to share about the faithfulness that God had in their life, the deliverance or the whatever it was. And so to me, it's like, I have all these things and I know that I'm going to work hard and I'm going to persevere and I'm going to go through all this because I know that when I get to the end, it's going to be another stone that I get to stack on this monument that I'm building for the Lord. And when people come and ask me, hey, what does this stone right here stand for? I get to share with them about the faithfulness that God has had in my life.
I love it.
And that's what drives me. And it's not that I don't get tired. It's not that it's not hard. It's not that I don't feel like quitting sometimes, or it would just be easier to do it differently. It's that I understand the purpose behind it. And the purpose of it is what continually drives me to want to get that done. And it's bigger than me, right? It's bigger than just my family. It's bigger than how long I'll be living on this earth. It goes so much deeper than that. And so that's that continual drive to try to be excellent in everything that I do so that I can win as many hearts for the Lord as possible.
So good. So as we wrap up, I'm going to give you the final word. What is it that you want to leave us with? You've been so generous and gracious with your time, and we've gone over 6 minutes, but I want you to have the final word. What do you want to leave us with?
I think that what I want to leave everybody with is I think we've talked a lot about this idea of excellence tonight. You've heard me talk about all the areas that I was trying to be excellent in and how to be excellent and how to be the best in the world and all that kind of stuff. I think it's easy to take that stuff and make the connection to our walk with Christ. And if we want to do the things that we want to do and have a great walk with Christ, these are also kind of things that we can pull, inspirations that we can pull into the discipline of that. But what I want people to understand is that I was in 2008, and it was the 2008 Olympic trials at the University of Oregon. And I was doing my competition there at the trials, and I had this whole moment where I started to do really bad in a couple of events, and I went under the bleachers, and this is a longer story, but I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So I went under the bleachers and I had this powwow with God, and I was like, listen, Lord, if this is how it's going to be, I don't want to have anything to do with it. I want to be done. I was going to come up with an injury and fake an injury so that I didn't have to keep competing. And the reason why is because I was scared of not qualifying and what that would mean, because I was doing so poorly at this point. And I was telling you, 2008 was the year that I was expected to win. Everybody was watching me. All the eyes were on me. And I didn't know what was going to happen. And I was afraid, what if I try and I fail, or what if I screw up, or whatever? Am I going to let all these people down? They're going to be so, the embarrassment. I mean, all of my sponsors and the commercials that they filmed are going to be a waste now. And I mean, all of this is running through my head. And so I thought, well, you know what? I'm just gonna throw in the towel. At least if I fake an injury, at least I know what to expect. And it's not, I didn't make it, but there's a reason why I didn't make it. And so that's a little bit more palatable than if I tried and just didn't, and I wasn't good enough. Right. And as I'm having this conversation with God, I'm like, listen, I'm done, I'm out. And I was walking back out from under the bleachers, and I heard this voice speak to me, and the voice said, Bryan, I don't expect you to be perfect. I just expect you to give me your best, and I'll make it good enough. And I remember, at that moment saying, okay, well, that's like too simple, but okay, Lord, I'm going to give you the high jump, and which is the next event, and I'm going to give it everything I've got. And if you don't show up, then I said, I'm out, I'm done. Like, I'm giving you the high jump, and that's it. And anyways, long story short, I went on to jump up almost a personal best. I set an Olympic trials record that year, of course, qualifying for the Olympic Games and going on to win my Olympic medal. But the story there is, in our pursuit of trying to be excellent, right? As we strive for excellence in our walk with Christ, as a parent, as a husband, as a wife, as a mother, father, whatever it might be, businessman, businesswoman, I know it can be scary, right? It can be hard. There's times when you want to give up. As a parent, I'm constantly wondering how badly I'm damaging my children,
right?
And I'm just like, what in the world, like, are they going to make it? I don't want to be the reason, my imperfections, I don't want to be the one that screws them up. Am I a failure? And I just always am reminded of that time under the bleachers when God said, Bryan, I don't expect you to be perfect. I just expect you to give me your best, and I'll make it good enough. And that has been something that I have to constantly remind myself of, because so often I like I told you before, I know that I'm broken, and I know that I don't deserve these things, and I know that I'm going to screw up again. And sometimes when I get into that funk, it's like I have to remind myself that that's okay, and for some of us, our best might be what I did. It might be competing on the world scene and conquering the world, and literally being able to call yourself the world's greatest athlete, right? For others of us, it might be what my mom went through when she was going through her divorce. It might be laying in your bedroom and crying for hours upon hours upon hours, but not giving up, right? But either way, that's all God's asking you for. And whether you go and do what I did or you do what my mom did, I think God will honor that. Yeah. He will honor the fact that you showed up, you gave whatever it was that you had. And just to, for everyone to understand, God honored that effort from my mom, the fact that she never gave up. She wasn't perfect. She messed up. She never gave up. And he honored that in my life. Wow. And I'm living out, that blessing because of my mom's faithfulness, because of Christ's faithfulness to that. And I went on to win an Olympic gold medal because of my faithfulness to the calling that my mom told me God had on me from when I was in her stomach all the way to that point. And I didn't give up. I didn't allow fear and doubt and all those things to creep in. And I just did what I could, what I had. I gave it to the Lord, and he made it good enough. Right. And now my kids get to experience the blessing of that faithfulness. Right. And it's so much bigger than you could think. And it goes so much deeper than I think sometimes we realize. But again, just don't focus on being perfect. We always want to be excellent. We want to give everything we've got, but just remember that God's in control. He's the one that will make it good enough, and he'll take our imperfections and he'll turn them into miracles. And what more could we ask for?
So good. And you've written a book, an autobiography. What's the title?
It's called Redemption.
Redemption. It's on Amazon.
It's on Amazon, or you can go onto my Instagram account, and I've got a link tree there. You click on that. There's a link right there that you can click on, take you right to an area that you can buy it.
And your Instagram is Bryan Clay?
Yep, it's just at Bryan Clay, Bryan with a Y, so it's BRYAN CLAY.
CLAY. Thank you. You've been
problem.
Inspiring, and we're grateful. I feel like I just made a new friend tonight. So God bless you and your family, and we just are so grateful for the impact you've had speaking. You've been mentoring us tonight, and we're grateful. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks for having me. This was fun. Let me know. I'm happy to do it anytime.
Yep. And thanks DJ and Jeff Atlas and our men's ministry team for sponsoring this tonight. You guys made it happen. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Bryan. Thank you, brother. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Bryan.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good job, DJ.
Bye.
That was fun.
Bye-bye. Hey, Bill.
Bird.
Hey, Alan, Joyce. Hey,